book friends? We are back with another episode of Most Bookish. I am your host, Amanda, and you can find me here on YouTube at Most Bookish. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok under Most Bookish. Visit me everywhere, and I hope you guys are ready for today's video because I did not plan to make this video. I did not plan to review The Color Purple. However, I went to the movie theater and I saw the movie and I had all of the feelings about the way that that movie ended. And I was so upset. I was so upset. I came home and I said, I am reviewing this book right now. Right now. Now, let me preface this with, I am a huge fan of the original 1985 movie. I watched it so many times growing up with my mom, and I did read the book in college. And at first, my initial reaction in the theater at the end of the movie, what upset me was the ending. At the end of the movie, I was like, what did they do with Alice's story? I'm enraged. It's a catastrophe, calling my congressman. And then as I started to head home, like my sprinkles of having read this in college started coming back to me. We're talking about The Color Purple, by the way. Color Purple. Today's review is on The Color Purple. The story, the book, and the two movies. The one that came out in 1985, starring Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah as Sophia, and the one that came out, the musical version that came out this past December 2023, starring Fantasia and Taraji P. Henson as the Suge character. So the sprinkles start happening, and I'm thinking to myself, did the 2023 movie actually come out closer to Alice Walker's book? Like I'm getting like moments of like, wait a minute, I think I remember something. I think I remember blocking out the book because I preferred the version in the movie, which you're never gonna hear me say, right? Like the book is always sacrosanct. Book is the story, and any other version is, you know, a watered down, less vibrant version of that story, right? There are certain stories that I'm happy that I watched the movie first, like my first video, Jurassic Park, because I loved that movie so much, and the knowledge of those novels would have marred the viewing of that movie. By the way, if you did not already see that one, go back and check it out. My first book review was on Jurassic Park, and a part of me is happy that that is also the case with The Color Purple, is that I saw the movie again. It was I don't want to say tradition, but my mom loved the movie and I watched it so many times with her that I grew up loving the movie, even though it's a really difficult movie to watch. It is very harsh and the themes are very harsh, and I don't remember what age I started watching it with her, but my mom was always very open with me about all topics and she wanted me to be informed. So I go to the movie theater, I watch the movie, it ends, and I'm like, that is not my movie, and I'm going to reread the book. And as I reread the book, a few things happen. One, I'm reminded that Alice Walker is brilliant, and there was very little that needed to happen in those movies besides inserting the actual words that she wrote in the books into people's mouths. And two, second movie might be a closer adaptation to the actual book than the first one. This presents problems for me. This presents problems for me, and we're going to talk about it. But again, the book's the most important thing. The book is the reality. It's the true story. So we're going to start there. The Color Purple. You see all my flaggies? Lots of flagging. Lots of flagging happened. Color Purple. I love this jacket. I love how purple it is. I don't remember what I did with the version that I had in college, but I didn't have it anymore. So I got this one. It is a more recent version, obviously, but I really like how it's very simple and it's about the book. I really don't like it when books that have been made into movies then have the movie as the book cover. It takes something away from it. I don't know. Anytime I have books like that, I always try to still find the older version that not have that movie or TV show on the cover. I get it, marketing, and so many more people watch movies and TV than read books. So they see it somewhere and they're like, oh, I know that show, and maybe they'll buy the book. Get it? But I don't like it. So this is the book. The paper, it's pretty nice. What's interesting, if you like this movie and you're not a big reader, this is a really good book to read because you see it's small compared to the regular hardback. This is teensy. It's only a few hundred pages. I read it in a couple of days, and she really does write most of it as dialogue almost. And if you've ever read like a play, you know that even even if it's 200 pages, in regular novel world, that's probably like 100. So it's pretty quick read. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful story. What is the story? For those of you who have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. The Color Purple is a novel set in 1900s Georgia, early 1900s. I want to say 1908. I believe that's what the year the movie references. However, there are no dates inside of the novel. The story is set in not Reconstruction Georgia, because technically there are a lot of different time periods that people call Reconstruction. And what is Reconstruction? Reconstruction is a time period after the Civil War in which the southern states were either by military force or otherwise forced to reconcile all of these now free Black people into their population in a way that did not immediately plunge them directly back into some kind of slavery. So depending on the state, you had either a large military presence or you had federal representatives coming in, forcing those states to enact laws or include this group of people in ways that were equitable and fair, which they were never equitable and fair anyways, because today's idea of fair and equitable is very different. Like back then, enslaved people were property. They were the equivalent to your car. And so going from treating somebody as if they're your car to treating somebody as if they are a person, all amidst this upheaval, because these people have been making tons of money off of these Black people for however many years, depending on how long they've been alive. And their whole industry runs off of unpaid labor. So now they have to figure out a way to have the labor to still run all of their businesses. And you would say, you know, well, evil slaveholders, you were defeated, so how about you make less profits and you pay them a decent wage if they want to still work the land, because they didn't all just want to up and go somewhere else. This was their home their entire lives. You pay them a decent wage, or you give them property, because all of this property is stolen, right? You give them some property and they can work it, and then you have an economy that is more equitable for everybody. But, you know, as we've talked about on this channel before, the people in power don't like to give up power. So what they did instead was devise ways to enslave these same people in different ways. Georgia especially was really on the road to putting everything back to the way it had been. They had been decimated by Sherman's March to the Sea. This was a Union general who made it a point to raise Georgia and run through the state all the way to Savannah and demolish as much as he possibly could, because Georgia in particular had really been a stronghold of the Confederacy, and they were a force to be reckoned with during the conflict, during the Civil War. And so there were a lot of people in that state who were mad, and they wanted their state back, and they wanted to put things back the way that they were. They had been sanctioned several times. They were not allowed to join in Congress. They were not allowed to come back to the Capitol until they started complying with this new way of life. They did not see the light, and the federal government had to step in multiple times. At a certain point, because the amount of lives lost during the Civil War, there was almost an equal amount of Black and white people in Georgia. There was like 500,000 whites, 500,000 Blacks. With that environment, you're set up to really reestablish a society that includes more different types of people. But again, the ones in power weren't having it. And they were even more paranoid, I would think, than before, because again, you're more on a more even playing field number-wise. Their big fight, especially in the beginning, was we don't want to give any of these people voting rights, because in that way you got 500,000 extra people who get to decide who's in the legislature. So like I said, the federal government comes in, they force them, there's Black people as representatives, and on the surface, on the official government surface level, there's a whole mix-up of who's controlling the state. Again, the actual people in the state are fighting against this. The actual white people in the state are fighting against this. Especially in the beginning, Black people still didn't have the right to vote. So they're forcing situations where every time the government will come in and remove the Democrats from power, which at this time, that's going to get a little confusing, right? The Democrats were actually the conservatives and they were the ex-slaveholders. Every time they would remove the Democrats from power, the Republicans would take hold for a little bit, who were the Union people, the non-slaveholders. Just by volume, they'd end up getting ousted and it'd go back to status quo. However, there was no Black code in Georgia the way there was in, I think, every other southern state that actually barred Black people from owning property or inheriting property. So over time, there were Black landowners. They did struggle and figure out a way to own things and sell them and inherit them for posterity. And this is the world that we walk into. Celie, who is the main character of the novel, is a young girl in her early teens who has been raped by her father, who we're introduced to as her father. She's been raped multiple times because he's a monster. But the reasoning that she's giving, it's written from her perspective, and she's a very simplistic and straightforward individual. She just speaks about what she sees. She just speaks about what she knows. There's not a lot of introspection. There's not a lot of analysis of anything. She is just saying, my mom has been sick for a long time, and since she's not able to do her job, I am now the second one in line. She gets raped for years, and she gets impregnated twice, and both of her babies are given away. For a while in the beginning, she believes that they were killed, that the father took them somewhere and killed them. However, her younger sister, who's only a couple years younger than her, Nettie, ends up saying she knows, or she heard of, them being adopted by a couple in town. After this, her mother dies. Her father doesn't really want her around, and a gentleman by the name in the book of Mr. Blank, so he's just referred to as Mr. through the whole story. So Mr. shows up. He has interest in her younger sister, Nettie, and the father says, no, you can't have Nettie. Nettie goes to school. Nettie's smart. She's going to make something of herself. You cannot have her. You have a rundown house with all of those kids that need taking care of since your wife died. I have just the right one for you. You can have Celie. She will work like a mule. She's the one that you want. And Mr. is like, no, that's not the one I want. He doesn't take her at first, but after a little bit of time, since he's struggling on his own, he ends up taking Celie and treats her like this mule for 30 years. I don't know, however much time goes by at this point. His house is disgusting. His kids have been uncared for since who knows how long. And Celie commences to go in and clean everything up, and the kids hate her, but she cleans them up. The new husband, Mr., is basically raping her because there's no like real physical anything going on. She's just submitting to her husband. There are scenes of, you know, he just climbs on top of her and does his business. That's a reference at some point where the person she's talking to is like, you make it sound like he's using the toilet. And she says, well, that's how I feel. So that's going on, but she just thinks that this is what her life as this person's wife is supposed to be. And she goes about doing the best that she can to avoid him beating her for whatever random things he feels like beating her about that she's not completing the way that he wants her to. Nettie turns up trying to get away from their father because she thinks that he's going to start raping her next. At first, Mr. says that she can stay with them, but it's clear that he has an ulterior motive. And when he tries to make a move on her and she says no, he tells Celie that she has to leave. Nettie ends up running off. Celie doesn't know where she goes. She tells her, please write to me. She says nothing but death would keep her from it. Then Celie never gets a letter from her. Years go by where Celie is basically just living the same life of a drudge. And you cut to however many years down the line where the kids are grown up now. The main kid, the oldest kid is Harpo, and characters start being presented into the story that present a different version of what a woman could be at that time. So far, it's like, this is a horrible time period and there's all this abuse going on. However, there are women who are trying to take back some of their agency, trying to be free or quote unquote act like men throughout the story. So at this point, you meet Sophia, who is the woman that Harpo loves. Harpo is Mr./Albert's, you find out his name at a certain point, Albert's oldest son. This woman, Sophia, is a strong character.
Y'all children, get out of this yard. Go on home somewhere. Harpo, come on down here. I need you to hold this baby. Now keep yourself busy. I see you busy making a racket. Now come on down here.
She shows up to tell Harpo's dad that she is pregnant and they are getting married and he loves her. And Harpo's dad, Albert, basically calls her a tramp. How do I know that that's his kid? And I don't care what you're saying, my son's not going to marry you. And Harpo stands there terrified of his father because his father's an abuser and he's abused the kids along with Celie for all these years. And she just tells him, Harpo, don't make me wait too long. They do end up getting married. They have their baby together. Harpo builds a house for them on the property, on Albert's property that's by the swamp, and proceeds to try to subjugate her for years. He chose her because she's this vibrant, vivacious, strong character, this strong woman that he's in love with. And then because his idea of what a man should be is what he's been watching his father do all of these years, he then tries to be that man with Sophia. And he tries to assert his dominance. And at a certain point, he comes and asks Celie for advice, like, why doesn't she listen to me? What can I do to get her to listen to me the way that you listen to my father? And Celie's like, you should beat her. So they fight, but mind you, Sophia is not playing those kind of games, and she fights back and beats him up. And then she comes to Celie and it's like, why would you tell him to beat me? It's a famous monologue in the movie, in the 1985 movie. My whole life I had to fight. I had to fight my brothers, I had to fight my father, I had to fight my uncles. I don't know if she says father, but my uncles, my brothers. Girl child ain't safe in a family of men. So she's like, why would you do this to me? Why would you say this?
All my life I had to fight. I had to fight my daddy, I had to fight my uncles, I had to fight my brothers. Girl child ain't safe in the family men's. But I ain't never thought I had to fight in my own house. I loves Harpo. God knows I do. But I kill him dead before I let him beat me.
And Celie's like, I'm sorry. You're just all the things that I can't be. You're all the things that I'm not. I shouldn't have said it. I'm so sorry. Harpo and Sophia proceed to duke it out for however long until she gets sick of it and takes the kids and leaves. Goes with her sisters. But this is the first awakening, opening of eyes. This is the first moment where Celie is seeing a version of a woman that can be some other version of womanhood. Throughout this time, there are pictures in her house of a woman called Shug Avery, who Albert has been in love with his whole life. The reason that Celie gives, the reason why he beats her is because she's not Shug. His father did not approve of her. She was seen as a loose type of woman, the same way he didn't approve of Sophia. But the difference is Albert wasn't brave enough to still marry Shug. However, he had 3 kids, I believe, with her. She is now a singer. She's a traveling singer who does well for herself, and she's going to come visit Albert and Celie because she's gotten ill and she needs somewhere to recuperate. And during that time, Celie takes care of her. She nurses her back to health, and they end up having a relationship, even though when Shug first comes in, she's really mean to her because she's like, you know, Albert's wife, and Shug is in love with Albert, and she's not going to treat her right. She's going to treat her like, you know, the throwaway wife, and look, watch me walk in your house and do what I want with your man. Celie's just such a big-hearted, lovable character that immediately wants to have a relationship with Shug and is intrigued by Shug. Shug as this free, sexual, brazen woman, but also she thinks she's gorgeous. She thinks she is amazing. She is actually attracted to her on a sexual level in a way that she doesn't really understand. So they end up forming a real relationship outside of Albert.
Sister, you've been on my mind.
During this time, Albert's not abusive to Celie. They kind of form a happy trio in the house. Even though Mr.'s brother comes by and has something to say about Shug being there, his father has something to say about Shug being there. There are a few more characters in the books than are in the movies, which obviously makes sense. Like, you can't have a 7-hour movie. So there are some of Albert's family members that are also in the book that don't exist elsewhere, but they play very minor roles in and out, like his brother. But they don't care. They're happy together. Shug goes and sings at Harpo's new juke joint, which he has turned his house into a juke joint since Sophia left him, and he wasn't doing very well money-wise until she comes and sings, and then that helps his juke joint be successful. In the book, Shug's family does not agree with her lifestyle, but they are not, her father's not the preacher figure that he ends up being in the movies. So that whole scene of her walking to the church and singing while she's walking to the church, that's so iconic from the movies, and is actually one of my favorite parts of the movies because the song's amazing. Her walking up to the church with all the juke joint people, and in the church it's the holy people, and they kind of invade, and she's just singing the song, and her voice is so much better than the girl in the church who for a second thought that voice was herself and realizes that couldn't be me. By the way, Shug's voice is not Margaret Avery's voice. Margaret Avery is the character that plays Shug in the 1985 condition. And she's not the one actually singing. She's dubbed over. The voice is actually an Afro-Latina by the name of Tata Vega. She still sings. She sings that song, God is Trying to Tell You Something, that's famous in that scene. And she actually wrote some parts of the song and she's not credited on it. Supposedly, this is what the internet says. But if you watch any of her videos, she has an amazing voice. All of the singing in that movie is just phenomenal. So she actually sings all of the parts with Suge Avery in it that Margaret Avery plays. So Harpo's is successful. Suge and Albert and Celie are living life as a trio very happily. So we're seeing that Celie is starting to see different versions of what women are like in this life that they're all living, and the different versions of herself that she could possibly be. And she is going to explore that more. And also we're going to get the ending, which is what even motivated me to make this video, and how it differentiates between the two movies and the book, and why I almost lost my mind in the theater. So if you are interested in all of my insaneness and digging a little deeper into how this whole story gets resolved, then show up for part 2 of this Color Purple book review. It is coming up very shortly. I hope that you stick around for it and find out, 1, what happened, but 2, why this story isn't just cut and dry, why it's more complicated, and why I would even want to talk about it. So I'm so glad you came back to this one, but I will see you in the next one, book friends. Bye.